Jamestown is the home of the world's largest buffalo and to many people of European descent. Last February, it also became home to 20 different Somali families who are here looking for the American dream. They left Somalia starting January 1991 when their country's government collapsed in civil war.
If you come out of your house, like if you go shopping, you don't know if you're going to come back alive or not.
They killed my father and my big brother and my young brother.
I think it became part of survival, to kill, because, when this guy has, 2 or 3 kids and he doesn't have any way of feeding them except, to get hired for that, warlord guy who's giving him a gun and say, I will pay you $100 if you take this gun and, do whatever I tell you. He will do it, and that's, what they do.
So a lot of people, when they get a chance to leave, that's like the happiest day they will have. They'll be so happy. If somebody says, oh, let me take you, you want to come to America, you want to go to Europe, that's a good opportunity for them, and they're going to be happy about that too. So at least they can start their life somewhere else and be happy, live a normal life.
Somalis have taken refuge throughout the world. Many of the Somalis living in Jamestown have been U.S. citizens for up to 10 years and heard about North Dakota through friends living in Fargo and Grand Forks.
Kids can go to school, it's good education, it's good place to live in North Dakota.
A few Jamestown people had met a Somali, but everyone had an opinion about them.
I've never met any of them. I see them around like at Walmart and stuff, but I'm not afraid or anything of the people from Somalia. I think that, everyone should be welcome here. That's the whole basis for our country.
Somalians don't belong here because they're taking housing vouchers that belong to us. I also hear they're kind of rude when they go in stores and stuff. And a lot of people told me that. And basically, most of them are Muslims, and I hear Muslims are just moving to places to take them over.
I asked if he'd met any or had any questions about them.
Not really, no. I already know what I know already, so.
City Council member Charlie Karajan works in a downtown office next to Jama's African Foods.
A lot of the other Somalians have come in, and I've got to know them, and they seem to know me, and we get along pretty good. You should get to know them before you judge them too severely. And that unfortunately, most of them are Muslims, and there's a lot of bad press about the Muslims, and people just judge everybody by the bad ones, just like anything else.
Somali men and women sense judgment.
They have seen the same thing I seen when I came here, why people looking at us like, we different, like we're in the wrong place. That's the same way I felt, I have seen people look at me like, yo, like I'm in somebody's house, you know what I mean? Like I can't walk into your house and people look at me like, what are you doing? What are you doing in my house?
Somalis want to sustain their culture, but also want to be part of American culture.
Because we live in America, that is the only way we can survive here, celebrate with the Americans.
It's easier said than done.
We came from way different culture and country, and we came here, and it's confusion, So I'm glad that our kids, like her generation, my generation, the young ones, go to school and bring home, the experience of the school and teach the parents,
Most Somali men found jobs in Jamestown, but Somali women haven't been as fortunate.
So we wait one day maybe, and we like it. When we got a job, say, yeah, we got a job. So we like it, we stay, But the pressure we have is, you have to pay light, you have to pay food, you have to pay your car.
One Somali man's side job is educating his country through music. He's a member of Wayab Housam, which means new era in English.
Our goal is to tell the young generation that they fight for nothing. and all people giving them gun and drugs to kill each other.
The group still collaborates and has added former militia members.
When I listened to the band's music, I was convinced that I didn't belong to the battlefields. I decided to come out here and join them spread the message.
But this educational alternative still has a deadly price.
We got a lot of phone calls for the warlords that they're saying if you don't stop it, we're gonna kill you. We know where you at, guys. They sent me a couple of emails that they told me that at that time I was in Denver, Colorado. They told me that we know you're in Denver, Colorado. We're gonna come there and get you, And I was wondering. The next day they shoot one of my friends, the band elder. He's in Kenya. They shoot him a couple times in his stomach.
The group continues their battle in Somalia's civil war, hoping one day to peacefully sing and rap at home. Other Somalis plan to rebuild their country by attending college to bring home education.
We are the future, Everybody that survived to get out the country, wherever they made it, Europe, we spread all around the world, Somalians are not only in Jamestown, not only in America. Everybody in his mind, every Somalian live every corner in the world, his mind is coming back home one day.
For JCTV News, this is Richard Schmidt, Jamestown.
"22 years ago, civil war led to the collapse of Somalia. Over 1 million Somalis fled the country and settled into new homes across the globe. But today, Somalia is beginning to get back on its feet. The reconstruction process has started. A central government has been established, and the region is once again experiencing a sense of stability. However, without a central government or central bank, for much of the last 2 decades, Somalia could not operate developed mainstream financial institutions. In this void of government and financial regulations, common banking tools such as loans, saving accounts, and wire transfers simply could not exist in the country. Within this gap, innovative Somali money transfer systems emerged to ensure that the region's large diaspora overseas could continue to send money back to Somalia. Around 1.0 to 1.5 billion US dollars is remitted annually through these Somali money transfer systems, or SMTs, to 40% of the Somali population. It's a fast, efficient system that gets more money into the hands of Somalis than global humanitarian aid. Money is given to an agent in Europe or North America to send to Somalia. SMTs charge a 3 to 4% service fee. Other money wire transfer services charge approximately 6 to 8%. Money is not physically sent to Somalia. Local offices in Somalia receive a message from the overseas SMTs and pay out designated amounts from their on-site cash reserves, usually within 24 hours. At a later time, SMTs use major banks to send bulk deposits to clearinghouses, often in the Gulf, where the money is converted into Somali shillings. This money is used to replenish the supplies of the local agents in Somalia. SMTs exist throughout the region, including in areas that are too remote or dangerous for banking institutions to operate. 2/3 of remittances go to individual recipients and are used to pay for household expenses. 35% of Somalis who receive remittances say that they could not afford to buy food without this income. In addition to basic consumption, remittance funds go to organizations, businesses, and development projects. The diaspora provides strong support for health and education services, and up to 30% of Somali business startups are funded by the diaspora. Recently, some major UK banks announced that they will withdraw their support from Somalia's SMT businesses, citing insufficient checks in place to prevent the abuse of their services and too great a regulatory risk for these banks. Unfortunately, this disruption could have serious repercussions for foreign investment, economic development, and stability in Somalia. How will the current Somali money transfer industry evolve? How will Somalis receive money for household expenses, businesses, or economic development needs? How will investors fund projects and businesses in Somalia? No doubt, new systems will emerge to ensure money can continue to flow into Somalia. However, the concern for many onlookers is whether these transfers will actually be less regulated and less transparent. This is a global problem that requires a global solution. Somalia's continued stability and future depends crucially on economic development and reconstruction. Fragile states require jobs, economic growth, and the promise of productive, healthy livelihoods to achieve stability and a lasting peace. Obstructing the operations of compliant SMTs without providing adequate, safe alternatives could have a severe impact on Somalia's economic reconstruction. It is imperative to protect the livelihoods of those Somalis who are dependent on remittances.
So I'm going to invite Ikram Jama to come up.
For many people in the West, the name Somalia has come to be associated with the faces of the starving that are now so hauntingly familiar. This small piece of Africa has a fascinating past and a distinct culture. Sadly, so much of that has been obscured by the images of the famine and the relentless civil war. So what we do know about this country is that it is in the midst of much suffering. Our senior correspondent, Brian Stewart, is no stranger to Africa and its history. And tonight, to help us understand a little more about Somalia, he has prepared this background report.
So I'm starting with this piece. This is actually available through the CDC archives. And it shows the Somalia Affair. So I want to tell you people are familiar with what the Somalia Affair actually is. Other than like Farah, the back, rationing Luther, the professor. Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I have to sort of set the stage a bit. I'm not going to play the clips because some of the clips are actually quite disturbing. But basically, during the crisis in Somalia, we actually sent peacekeepers. So Canada sent peacekeepers. And there was an incident, the actual images related to that incident came out in '95. Basically, it ends up our peacekeepers were involved in the beating and torture and murder of a 16-year-old Somali boy. We know about this because they took pictures of it, which I'm not going to show. And then also other video footage was shown of our peacekeepers joking about shooting, wanting to shoot more teenagers, using the N-word to refer to the people that they were supposedly protecting. And basically, it really showed an attitude that seemed to be almost sort of celebrating the fact that they were, it was very similar to Abu Ghraib. Like when Abu Ghraib came out in terms of the photos like that, it was very similar in terms of those kind of photos. Now, the story of the Somalia Affair was, I think, is important to bring up because when what we're going to be talking about with Ikram Jam today is sort of how how the media coverage of the Somali community in the 90s to now has impacted the integration of the community. And I think what has to be understood is that as the community was coming in, we had this other story going on about Canada having to sort of realize that our peacekeepers, we really, really are very proud of, and that really that time in the 90s, we weren't involved in combat, we were peacekeeping, had done something so disgraceful that we were sort of calling into question how we thought about ourselves. So I will be referring to the Somali affair, and I really do recommend people do actually go to check this out themselves. It's an important part of Canadian history, which actually has, unfortunately, the fact that we don't know about it is actually very disturbing because it's a major issue in our military history. So this is Ekram Jama.
Yes. Well, I'm Ekram Jama. I live in Ottawa, and I've lived here for the last 18 years. And I know Shelby very well from the community, and I thought I would
She used to be my boss. And all these girls should know about her because she created the program.
So I thought I would support in her role as Oprah. So here I am on Oprah Shelby.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
So, again, we have to be close on time because you and I can talk for hours. But I really want you to sort of give a picture when you first came here in 1992. Were you aware of how the media was covering your community when you first came? And maybe you could talk a bit about how the story's evolved, and also reflecting on how the story of the Somali affair also impacted the community in terms of thinking, because I know myself as a young black girl, when I watched that footage in 1995, it made me feel scared to be a Canadian as a black person because, they were referring the N-word, and I was like, these are Canadian guys walking around with guns, saying this in another country, what are they doing here? And I'm just wondering how that also affects the community in terms of we just came to this country, and already it's really cold, and then we also have this to deal with.
Well, if I try to tell the stories of the last 18 years, it's going to take a long time. And I love stories, but I think I'm going to try to just give you a bit of a historical overview of some of the things that I remember when I was part of. And why can I comment on this? I guess because I was part of the community as a young Somali person at the time, and also worked with the Somali community as an activist, as an organizer. So I'm coming from both a service provider and a community member. So 1992, Ottawa was very new to me. I moved from Toronto for school, and I was in the country for 3 years. Somali community in Ottawa in 1992, very young community, very new community, a lot of families with lots of children who are now adults.
Some of them are here.
Some of them are here probably, yeah. And so I think we were coming, basically, the Ottawa community, larger community, didn't know much about the Somalis, except what was coming through the media, and that was basically about the civil war, being refugees, how we got here. So the first coverage wasn't so bad, except it was quite victimizing. Really talking about that they were really refugees and they came through a civil war and they are poor and they are struggling. Most of it true, but didn't really capture any other aspects of what the Somalis brought. From a biased perspective, I would say we brought quite a lot, but that wasn't really in the media. And so then after a while, we started getting from sympathy to actually now being questioned, and we, every newcomer immigrant, from the Japanese to the earlier times, we know every community goes through its own initiation period where they're actually interrogated, questioned, and that's normal. But I think with the Somali experience, it was kind of a different. Immigrants from Africa, I think we're the largest African Muslim group that arrived, so we brought a lot of difference.
We're the largest African group.
African in Ottawa, yes, and so we look different, we acted different, we dressed differently. And even though I think we had a lot of similarities with a lot of people, the difference was more highlighted than the similarities. So the portrayal was they were highly uneducated, struggling, they did not fit in with Canadian society, they're so different, should they really be here, will they survive? And I think one of the things that I, as a young student in one classroom, I remember the discussion came up and I was confused because I told them most Somalis that are in Ottawa actually are the middle class, educated class, so it's not. We know when wars happen, the people who leave first are not the poor. We know the people with money will get out, the people with professions will get out, the people who could get visas will get out. So the Somalis who are here, who are really not the poor people, those who are still in refugee camps in neighboring countries. They were highly educated, highly skilled, middle class aspirations and dreams. And so the portrayal and the reality were not fitting in for many of us. But at the time, because we were a young community and also learning and confused, there was no voice to counter what was happening in the media. So it was just what the Canadians were hearing were these things. But some of my friends here will remember we did a lot of work as students from Calgary University, Ottawa U. We tried to educate the Canadian public. We had big dreams and a lot of confidence. And so we did workshops, we had pamphlets. And whenever we have an audience like this and we talk about Somali the way we know, and it becomes positive, then there will be another hairline. Oh, now they're collecting welfare and sending women to Somalia. And we're like, oh, that is really bad. So to compete with the hairlines was very heavy. And I think on a personal note, I remember 4 friends of me and my 3 friends would meet every Thursday on Rideau. There used to be a Tim Hortons. And 3 of us went to Calgary University, 1 was going to Algonquin. And so we all met there to have breakfast, cheap breakfast, like bagels and tea. And it was the highlight of the week, so every Thursday. And when before the Somalia affair, but the media started talking about the war and the clans and how they're sending money back home, we were so visible because 4 of us would be there speaking Somali and loud, and people knew. So we decided not to go to Tim Hortons. We were like, this is really not good, because the media images were so bad and the allegations, we actually felt embarrassed to go to Tim Hortons. And we still had to have breakfast, so we moved to Calgary University, low building in the basement, which became our headquarters for 4 years. So I think, so those were some of the things that I think I can remember and how we struggled, and then the whole issue of FGM, and that became also...
Can you explain what that is? Not everyone necessarily knows what that is.
Yes. FGM is female genital mutilation. I don't use that term, I use female circumcision, and I won't get into that, but I think when that practice came into the media in a very sensational, out of context, blaming way, a lot of us really didn't have the capacity to engage with the media on it. When we tried, it didn't come out well. And I think we decided not to engage with the media, and it was a conscious decision not to really discuss this issue. But it did kind of portray our culture in a very, very interestingly backward way, and the whole Somaliness became about FGM for a while. People really liked it. So if people saw you, all they wanted to discuss was, did you go through this? And the next thing was, tell me more. So I think something so bright but so different, so kind of not really something people want to address, became the norm. I remember one time we were in on Parliament Hill, many Somali students trying to talk about some law, refugee law, and people came up to us and talked about FGM. So those were the things, and I think I just want to highlight what were the positives of going through some things like that, and I will talk about it with, later more maybe. It was really the community in Ottawa organized. We finally found the energy and the voice to actually come together and do our own advocacy at whatever spaces we can. So it was a lot of negative, but I think the positive was a community that really became very active. We went into social service a lot. A lot of Somalis now are in that in the helping professions for a reason, because we thought we were the best people to provide service to the community, we're the best people to speak on behalf of the community. And I really think, even though it was negative, that what it did was quite good, kind of galvanized people.
So in terms of, so that was the 90s, but in terms of now, how do you think the media portrayals are? Yes, it's a bit more balanced. One of the biggest Canadian stars is Kenan, he's Somali. And in Ottawa, those are people who are close to the spoken word scene know that, we have some amazing young Somali women poets. But in terms of the general picture, how do you see how the portrayals have changed? Do you feel that there's been a change?
There has been a change. I think positive change, because the Somali community after 20-some years is mature now, and I think there is a lot of positive voices from the community and allies also. It's not only Somalis who are addressing. There are a lot of people in Ottawa who are not Somali who know about the community, who work with the community. So allies, and I think advocacy is really good. We have a lot of spoken word poets who are doing a lot of art, and kind of going back to the Somali tradition of poetry. And even though they're using a different genre, which is very North American, they're still telling their stories in art, and that's a very positive thing. But I think the negativity hasn't finished, and I think we go through stages. So we moved away from FGM. Not a lot of people will talk about it now, but now we have the pirate issue because there's a lot of Somali pirates around. Even my son knows about pirates. I think it's a good thing.
So how old is he again? What is the context?
He's 5. So I got a sword from the dollar store, pirate store. So but I think the pirate issue is a lot in the media, and even though we're here and we're not in Somalia, and most Somali community groups are Canadian at this point, I think it still connects us to the homeland in a bad way. The other thing is the whole issue of Muslim terrorism, and there's allegations against young Muslim men, and they share that with other young Muslim men a lot, and that's really been a very negative coverage, I find. So a lot of the times we find it affects more the young males than the young females, whatever comes up, the pirate issue, the terrorist issue, the gang issue. So there are still negativity around, and a lot of work to be done.
Okay, so we're just going to talk a bit about some creative aspects the community's taken. So I'm actually going to show a clip, but before I show a clip, I'm wondering if you can tell me a bit about the film Family Motel.
Oh yes.
Oh, yes, and I know you're looking at your friend over there who's involved in making it.
Yes. Well, Family Motel is a film/documentary that addresses homelessness in Canada, and the producers, they chose a Somali family to follow and see how that, and this is a fictional Somali family, it's not a real Somali family. The actress actually is a social worker, and her daughters are acting in it, and so the co-producer is sitting over there. Her name is Honan, she knows more than I, but it's really a very interesting kind of grassroots community involvement was really high. So we were consulted, and a lot of people were consulted, and so it was really well done, I find.
So I'm going to show a clip from Family Motel, which was filmed here in Ottawa, again. And it's interesting, but Monia was talking about writing a novel in Ottawa, this film set in Ottawa. Beyond, we're talking about representation, the reality is in terms of Canadian cinema and literature, Ottawa is not depicted very often. That's another thing just to think about. Ottawa is, even though it's the nation's capital, is not actually part of the creative space of this country. Okay. Dr. Ali, what's going on? It doesn't look like it's on. It was on? Okay. Oh, this is black and I'm an idiot. Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Cook.
Ayana,
Can I talk to you, please?
you know, I'm just running out the door. The office is about to close in 3 minutes.
It's an emergency. It's urgent. Please, Mr. Cook. I really need to speak to you about my housing situation.
Listen, there's nothing that I found. I saw something for $950, but it's out of your price range. I'll see what I can do tomorrow. I'll try to see if there's a way.
I need your help to get out of that motel and get into some safe place with my children. I am about to lose my children. There are things happening in that motel that are going to affect my children for life. Do you understand, Mr. Cook?
I do understand, but we've talked about this before. There's a huge waiting list, and I'm really trying the best I can.
I have lost half of my family in my country. I've lost my country. I've come from war. I've been trying to establish myself in this country since the day I got here. The only things left in my life are those children, and if I don't get out of there, I'm going to lose them.
So again, as you mentioned, you know, one of the interesting things that came out of this sort of circle of activists, sort of your generation of activists, some of whom are here, was many went into the social service field. But that meant that what I found interesting, because my own background is growing up in subsidized housing, so my perspective on the Somali communities was different. Everyone else was sort of reading about them, they were my neighbors. But one of the things I found really fascinating was that it was a new community, but it was a new community that actually took on issues that had been plaguing Ottawa for years. So for example, our really horrible housing situation. Ottawa is a very expensive place to live. So if you have you know, issues of your low income, I know there's a person sitting right here who actually, that's one of her jobs is around income security and housing security. It's very hard to find a place to live. Another problem is the standard at the school. So there's something called beacon schools. So often schools that are in areas that are very low income, the standard of those schools are very low. There's also the situation of conditions at the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center, which also are very poor. These are issues that many members of the Somali community have actually taken a lead on bringing forward and bringing to the public's attention. These issues existed even before the Somali community came, but I would say the level of activism and the passion behind that activism really wasn't there. And so I'm just wanting you to reflect on, where does this activist spirit come from in this community that, just sort of new kids on the block, but, is really sort of move forward and addressing these issues. Because in many ways, this film was a collective effort on the part of the members of the Somali community in Ottawa to bring forward this issue of housing insecurity. And the film's been used to educate people about housing insecurity. And that's one example of the many things the Somali community has done to bring forward issues which, again, don't just affect the Somali community, are affecting many people in Ottawa.
Well, I think from my perspective, and of course, I'm only one person, but I think from what I remember, the Somali community, when they started becoming residents of the Ottawa housing, and not everybody was there, but a lot of families were there. It wasn't something they chose. They came, they were refugees, they didn't have jobs yet, they were poor, so you needed a housing, and you have 5 children. I mean, this was the logical place to be. And I think what was interesting was a lot of people in those housing were not poor back in their home country, so they were not really used to living in those conditions. But at the same time, we always talk about what do we bring as immigrants, and sometimes we don't really, a lot of us do not bring their culture forward for different reasons. But I think with the Somalis, one of the things we brought was we are not a class-based society generally. Even though we had professions and middle class, but the class did not really create divisions among people. If your brother was a middle class, wanted to be a doctor, and you were poor, you were expected to actually share some of that wealth. So when we came, poverty or being poor was not really something that you internalized. It wasn't an identity, it was something that you need to, so if you need to advocate for your housing, you advocated for it. And if you got a social housing, some of the Somali people we worked with renovated the basement. And they created very interesting basements because they wanted good places for their kids to hang out. And some of the workers were confused, how do you want to afford this, how do you want to afford that? Well, I'm going to collect my money and do whatever I can happen. I'll clean, but I need a basement that really works. So I think some of the things that I witnessed was that, and when I was working in those housing areas, I worked with Canadians who are poor as well. And it was difficult for me to understand some of the different, and some of the Canadians were actually also advocating for themselves in the end. So I think maybe that this class idea was not really entrenched in them. I think they did not shy away from wanting to live, to have something better, even though they didn't have the money or didn't have the class to actually want certain things, right? So it was kind of the audacity of not thinking poverty to be a condition of your life. It is just a period of time, and it's not an identity, and you don't have to really be humbled by it. I think be humble, be kind of respectful, but you don't have to be coward, and so I think that's where it was coming from.
So it was the audacity of the community. Right. So this is a community with a bit of reputation for audacity. Yes, anthropologists have written about this. But I think it definitely was a good thing for Ottawa. So the last thing we're going to reflect on a bit is you do some writing. You write sometimes, and you're a bit of a closet poet, but you also write some articles. And recently you wrote an op-ed for the Ottawa Citizen. And I'm just wondering if you can tell us a bit about the original concept behind that op-ed and how it was edited and the reaction to that. And that's actually the part we'll wrap up on.
Okay, so I guess it was a small piece. It was a letter to the editor, and I wrote it when I think I wrote it when there was an arrest of a couple of young men who were of Muslim background and the terrorist allegations that came with that. And I just wrote the piece to the Citizen. I think in probably frustration of some of the comments that I was hearing from the community, from the media, of blaming the whole community for what was not proven yet. It was allegation at the time, it was few individuals. But again, I felt we were all kind of indicted again. And I just wrote it quickly and sent it to the editor. And I think the title I wrote at the time, when Shelby and I talked about it, was In Search of Kinship, being a Muslim in Ottawa. And what I was trying to address was, every time we try to really get closer, as a community, a large community, Muslim and non-Muslim, something like that comes again. And then the division starts, and somehow I felt, here I am again, I have to answer to my fellow Canadians that I'm a Muslim, that I'm peaceful, that I'm actually good. And I really didn't want to go there anymore, and I was saying, what will it take to actually find kinship? And when this happens, we don't have to feel we're all indicted, but we actually feel as a community. Something happened, and the law will take care of it, or maybe it will be done fairly. in the criminal justice system. So I think when I sent the article, they liked it, they were going to publish it, and with some editing obviously, and I dealt with media before, so I know editing, but they changed the whole title. I don't think they understood the complexity of what I was trying to, the kinship piece was too hard maybe, or media sometimes wants some simple things, so the article became I'm sad. I wasn't sad, I was actually...
I'm sad,
I have to prove my Muslimness.
Your Canadianness.
My Canadianness as a Muslim to Canadian. So I think then when I read some of the comments, people were really very sympathetic and said, don't be sad, we really want you to be here. And we want people like Graham Jabbar to be in Canada and making me into a guest and the other Canadians, this is their country. So I think that is the kind of people I didn't want. Because I do consider myself to be very much a Canadian Ottawa person. I don't need permission from fellow Canadians to let me come here. But the conversation that I wanted wasn't that, but I got the guest one, and Ikram, stay, please stay, and I'm like, okay, I'm here. So I think when we write something, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes we want to engage with the media, but when we engage, we can't control what comes out. We will give an interview, if it cuts, they will have one sentence and maybe out of context. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't get it, and I think we have to keep working at it. I think that's the